The following is a TSN special report. Here's John Wells.
Good morning. It could be a rather historic day in Canadian football. Larry Smith, the commissioner of the Canadian Football League, will unveil his plans for expansion within the Canadian League. From 1 to 4 teams could be joining the league as early as the 1993 season. Not all in favor of this move, particularly with potential expansion to the United States, but a lot of people do think it's a good idea, and included on that list, Leif Pedersen. The league plans to expand. You think it's a good time to do this?
John, I think it's a great time to do it. I mean, I don't think you can stay status quo for a period of time. This is not the 70s anymore where 8, 9 teams were viable. I mean, this is time to try and seek some new revenues, to create some new excitement. And I think often in the reports that I've read the last few weeks, that really hasn't been mentioned. You know, they talk about, well, our team's going to pay the $3 million franchise fee to come into our league. But you hear that constantly. What I like to think of is the excitement that it could bring to the Canadian Football League. You know, I think people around the country are a little tired of seeing the same old teams all the time, and to have San Antonio or Sacramento come into town, hey, I think that's a good thing. One
of the interesting things that I've seen mentioned in the last couple of days is the fact that the league does not seem to be looking to the United States strictly to expand its base in television revenue. And this is one of the things that everybody in pro sports talks about. We need the big contract. We need a contract that's going to pay us millions of dollars from television. This expansion plan sounds to me like they're looking at the $3 million that they can get for a franchise fee, as well as potential down the road, but not necessarily basing the whole thing on TV.
If anybody watched Inside Sports last night with Dave Hodge and Larry Smith, it was interesting to see how Larry Smith had outlined a business plan for the new prospective franchises, and it included a budget based on the salary caps. It was a budget based on gross gate revenues, a budget based on local and national sponsorship. And this didn't include any monies from television. So they're outlining a basic business plan for new teams and for existing teams in the CFL that they can exist with the monies they get from those areas, and anything from TV would be gravy. So, I mean, that is a pretty outstanding way to operate.
Well, there are positives and negatives to the entire suggestion of expansion in Canadian football. We'll deal with those just a little bit later on as we continue here. We're going to take you live to the Sky Dome for the announcement by Larry Smith, the commissioner of the Canadian Football League, but standing by down there right now is Rod Smith. Rod?
Well, John, the announcement is coming up in a couple of minutes' time. I did a little bit of a survey, just milling about, trying to see if anyone here is against the whole concept of CFL expansion. And I must say that is a very difficult person to find. No one at all, and I've talked to about 20 people, have said that they are against it. And certainly the gentleman joining me now is not against it. Argo's Vice President, Brian Cooper. And Brian, this is something that the McNall Group, Bruce and John Candy and Wayne Gretzky, when they bought the team, this is something that you guys have wanted. And this must be, although it hasn't happened yet, this must be a happy moment.
Well, we're just pleased that through our Commissioner, Larry Smith, he has the same vision that our ownership group has, that we need to expand as a league, that we have a good product, and there are a lot of markets that want that product. So we're pleased that we're taking the proper steps forward, and I think this is the beginning of a great future for the CFL.
Now, I mentioned that I had a difficult time finding the negatives. I know, for one, Cal Murphy, the general manager in Winnipeg, is not at all happy with this, but he seems to be in the minority. Have you heard many dissenting voices about this whole idea?
I haven't heard many dissenting voices at all. There are a group of, I would say, populist fans that say, let's keep it Canadian, and certainly it's a nationalist point of view, but in order for survival for the league, in order for us to grow as any other business would want to grow, we have to look at new markets, and then we have to take advantage of them. I think, again, Larry Smith has done a very, very good job in sourcing out who may be involved in the future, and I'm really pleased and excited that it's happening.
Brian, you've been in Canada for a number of years. You spent much of your life here, but you are also an American citizen. How do you think the United States would embrace Canadian football?
Well, I'm actually a dual citizen, and I think a lot of those fans have watched the players that we bring up from the States throughout their college career on NCAA television broadcasts. So, in fact, they know those players better than we do. So I think they would love to see, you know, where they've gone on to, and they would love the type of ball that we play. I think our ball is wide open, similar to NCAA ball, and they have a pretty good following down in the States, so I don't think it's going to hurt us at all.
My mistake. You're an American and Canadian citizen.
Right.
One thing about Portland. You played that exhibition game against the Calgary Stampeders. I don't know if any numbers were released about the results of that game, attendance and the amount of money and everything else. What do you have to tell us about the Portland exhibition game?
Well, the Portland exhibition game was very successful, and I think the numbers were only a bit short of 20,000 in attendance. It was the first time that the CFL had gone down there. It wasn't promoted highly. They'd just come off their NBA Finals, I think it was. And they also had the Olympic Dream Team was starting to work out the following week. It was a big sports festival. So while we were sandwiched in between some of the usual sports fests, we did receive a lot of attention. They liked the type of football that we played, and I think more importantly, the ownership group saw value, and I think that will prove successful for us in the future.
Thanks very much, Brian.
Thank you.
Executive Vice President of the Toronto Argonauts, Brian Cooper. John and Leif, back to you.
All right, the announcement by Larry Smith, Commissioner of the Canadian Football League, coming up at the Sky Dome in just a few moments. Picking up on a couple of things that Brian was talking about there, was it inevitable that the Canadian Football League had to look to expansion with this new wave of new owners that's joined the league in the last little while?
Well, John, I think the writing was definitely on the wall when you had the Larry Rickmans, the Gleiberman family, and the McNall group come into the league, that it was inevitable that the expansion would take place. I mean, these guys are movers and shakers, you know. They didn't make all their money just by staying status quo, so, you know, there's no question the writing was on the wall, and they're looking to markets that can bring money into our league. And sure, there's going to be some dissenters. Cal Murphy is a dissenter, but hey, that's the dark ages. You got to move ahead and take your shot, and this looks like it's going to be their shot.
All right, well, we'll go down to Sky Dome now, and getting ready at the podium right now, Mike Murray, the Vice President of Communications for the Canadian Football League.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for coming to this very early morning press conference. For those of you who I have not had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Mike Murray, Vice President of Communications for the Canadian Football League. And on behalf of the CFL, your host here today, I want to thank everyone for attending this very historic press conference. I'd like to thank our partners in the television network, the Sports TSN, for broadcasting this press conference live, and to the fan radio station in Toronto. Today we turn over a new chapter in CFL history, and we look forward to prosperity and many years of future expansion. And I'd like to turn the proceedings over to our Commissioner, Mr. Larry Smith.
Is this on? Can you hear me now? I'd like to thank you all for coming out this morning. As I said to the media approximately 3 weeks ago, before and after a governor's meeting, people were asking me questions on expansion and what the CFL is up to. I at the time said that we would get back to you shortly after the governor's meeting that was held in Hamilton. It's taken a little while longer than I had anticipated. I thought it would be better to do some homework first before getting back to you. The purpose of today's meeting, and it is going to be a business meeting, is to provide you with a strategic overview of our concept of expansion and the opportunities that expansion provides or could provide to the Canadian Football League. I'll try to be as specific as I can and show you as much detail as I can. The purpose of today's meeting is to make sure that we're all going in the same direction, because this is obviously an important issue for us. Je sais qu'il y a beaucoup de gens du Québec qui sont ici. Bienvenue. Je vais essayer de communiquer en deux langues pour les points clés. Si vous avez des questions, j'espère que nous pouvons attendre pour la fin de la présentation. Le début, ce sera plus une présentation comme une présentation du business. C'est pas mal la même chose que j'ai faite avec le board du Labatt quand j'ai travaillé là. Je m'excuse, c'est un peu différent du côté du sport, mais je pense que ça va aller. Okay? Before I start, I'd just like to remind you, I don't want to take anything away from our playoff games and the Grey Cup coming up in the next couple of weeks. We do have a major rivalry and showdown in Steeltown this Sunday. Hamilton is getting kind of geared up because they've had their butts kicked 2 times in a row by Ottawa. They're excited about the fact that they can get back into the Eastern Final and hopefully into the final. And of course, Ottawa wants to prove after many years of mediocrity that they're a team to reckon with. So hopefully some of you may find your way down to Hamilton on Sunday. Now, in terms of the actual concept of what we're talking about, when we started off, and when I started as a commissioner, I drew up a 3-year business plan. And inside the business plan, there are various issues that we discussed, one of which was expansion. At the time, we looked at expansion in Canada and the U.S., and basically we looked at Montreal in terms of trying to regain Montreal. Montreal as being one of the major cities in our country and having a long history in the CFL was, in my mind, a very strategic position to have, and a position we could not live without. Avec Montréal, il y a plus de 6 millions de francophones et québécois dans la province. Ça constitue le 2e marché le plus grand dans le Canada, puis un marché très important. Basically, without Montreal in the market, you don't have a complete Canadian context. Therefore, the importance of Montreal as part of your league. The second issue, of course, which has not been discussed in great detail, was the issue of Halifax. The issue of Halifax is really tied to the venue question. When J.I. Albrecht and the Halifax Sooners, who never got off the ground, applied to the CFL for a franchise, the major problem that they faced or obstacle was venue. During my trip down into the States, I was fortunate enough to go through Sacramento and see some of the facilities that they have built. It's very interesting to note that in Sacramento, you only actually have about 7,000 to 8,000 permanent seats in the stadium, and there's another 23,000 which are temporary in nature. To construct a temporary stadium, you can do so for about $2.5 million. So people who say we need 30 or 40 or $50 million to construct a venue in a place like Halifax may be able to look at other options. And so in my mind, it creates an opportunity for us. Avec Halifax, il y a une opportunité pas mal importante. Vous voyez les facilités à St. Mary's, ils sont capables de à peu près mettre 10 000 personnes dans la stade, avec l'opportunité d'ajouter les chaises temporaires autour du stade. C'est possible d'agrandir le stade à peu près 30 000 personnes. Ça dit que maintenant Halifax devrait être considéré comme un point clé pour l'expansion. Once we talked about Canada, we went into the whole issue of the U.S. Initially, the idea was, let's set up a test market. In working in the packaged goods business in terms of expanding, you had 2 ways of entering the U.S. market. One was through what they call setting up a greenfield plant and expanding your business or making a strategic acquisition. The idea of Portland was we could get together with a team that had a tremendous deal of sports management expertise in the Portland Trail Blazers, get 2 to 3 years experience, and then expand by 2 to 3 sites. That was the original plan. The concept of U.S. entry was very simple. It was based on the idea of really going into the mid-sized U.S. cities. We have a great deal of respect for the National Football League, and we're not so silly to think as we ever want to go head-to-head with a competitor as well-established and really as fierce as the NFL. But the idea being is if we set ourselves up in mid-sized U.S. cities who were unlikely to secure NFL franchises and we could find strong local ownership, we would have a tremendous opportunity to be successful. And that, of course, demonstrates commonality besides a mid-sized city around 1.2 million like Portland and, of course, a city like Vancouver at 1.2 million. You do have some size similarities, you do have some cultural similarities, and at the same time, you know you're not going to be competing directly with your U.S. neighbor. The other idea was we would then evaluate the situation and then expand to 3 other locations. Vis-à-vis les États-Unis, nous avons commencé de penser de Portland, utiliser Portland comme un site de test, gagner l'expérience pour à peu près 3 ans, puis après ça, chercher 3 autres franchises aux États-Unis. Okay? That was the original plan. Now, in the recent past, a new opportunity has arisen. I don't know what you want to call it. You can call it suspension, you can call it termination, you can call it temporarily out of business, but the demise of the WLAF has created a window of opportunity in the United States. One thing that I have learned through my travels in the States is that there's a tremendously strong desire in many U.S. cities for professional football. Some of the cities have gone to the extreme where they spent over $100 million to create stadiums, partial stadiums for NFL expansion sites, and they'll never get those franchises, which does create an opportunity for people such as ourselves. Okay? The next concept along the way was that 4 WLAF centers or cities had the facilities, had the infrastructures, and were ready to go. And basically this is what we've learned in the last month. And we saw that there was an opportunity to build a position as an alternative football league and as a major alternative football league in North America. You may be wondering what alternative means, but basically the concept is creating a differentiated product and selling your differentiated product in another market where you're not going to go head-to-head with somebody in a Me Too situation. In other words, if I sell widgets against widgets and my widgets are no different from anyone else's widgets, you get your head blown in by economy of scale. Okay? So strategically, you're going on a differentiated product. And at the same time, what we want to do is look at the concept of exporting a differentiated product. Okay? Now, going to the present situation of the CFL, how we analyzed inside our own business. Our league is the oldest professional league in North America. I sat with a historian of the CFL, Greg Fulton, this morning, and Greg told me an old British garrison came into Montreal in the 1860s, went to McGill, showed them how to play rugby or football. McGill went down to Harvard, showed them how to play the game, and that's how the game originated in North America, out of a British garrison into McGill, into the U.S. So we are the initiators of football in North America. We can trace our league back to 1892 without too much difficulty. We have a wide open, unpredictable style of play, and we have an excellent on-field product, and this is how we see ourselves. We're going through a major transformation. I don't think it's rocket science to say that we are. With the influx of new owners, such as Bruce McNall and the Bernie Gleiberman, Larry Rickman, of course Bill Comrie and the new Hamilton group in a community sense, we have clearly had an emergence of a different and a more progressive style of management in terms of the league. And I'm happy to report that the way that we do business inside our own shop is like night and day from the time I started 9 months ago, and I think that's a tribute to some of the ownership that we have. And I'd like to make a special vote of thanks to people such as Bruce McNall and of course Brian Cooper, who handles a lot of the day-to-day work, and of course the people such as Gleibermans and Rickmans and the Comries are very important ingredients to us. Je veux dire que la Ligue a fait beaucoup de changements récemment avec les nouveaux propriétaires qui sont entrés dans la Ligue. C'est évident que notre structure de gestion c'est beaucoup plus progressif que c'était dans les années passées. We've had a history of financial volatility. When I go into the States, basically I say we're like Western pioneers or cowboys. We've been able to survive despite ourselves. This is being aggressively addressed through the implementation of strict financial controls, including salary and spending caps within the league. Most recently in our governor's meetings, we have made further changes to the control mechanisms used in our league, which we'll be discussing with you early in the new year. But the #1 priority I stated when I joined the league is we're going to get the ship in order in terms of the financial controls. I'm very pleased with the progress we've made this year, and we'll be tightening up the screws in the next period of time. The objective is simple. We will be a low-cost producer with a high-quality product, and that's kind of important to understand. The other point, of course, in our present situation is that we have not expanded our business since 1954 with the entry of the BC Lions. The last part of our present situation in the CFL, and we can't talk about ourselves without talking about the rest of the economic situation we're going through. It's obvious that North America is going through a major economic restructuring, and at the same time there are new business opportunities. There's certainly cultural groups that are emerging, such as the Asians in Western Canada and the Northwest U.S., the growth of the Hispanic population in the Southwest U.S., and of course the emergence of new trading patterns. In our business, there is an exciting North American opportunity in terms of football, which is available now. So as you can see, we're getting to the next point, which is the desired situation. What do we want to be? Well, obviously, the first point that I tried to state since coming in is that you have to have your house in order. Having your house in order means that your financial controls have a time to execute and be operational within your business. And by continuing to implement these programs, our profit and stability of teams, and therefore the actual value of our teams, is going to be improved. That's your base business. Your second point, of course, the growth of the CFL through development of revenue generation programs. The biggest opportunity area for us right now, frankly, is our merchandising business, which has been underutilized and undervalued over time, but provides a great opportunity for the CFL. And of course, the execution of a strategic management or expansion program, which gets us to the next point. What will these activities do? Well, if we're able to carry these off, then obviously we'll improve our image and our marketing potential of the product, and then we'll be able to build our position as a major North American league. And we'll be showcasing, of course, and I've had lots of feedback before this press conference about the threat of losing our identity. We will be showcasing the unique style of the Canadian game. Le point plus important que nous voulons discuter avec le monde, c'est que nous allons exporter un produit qui est uniquement canadien, avec la largeur puis la grandeur du terrain, le motion dans le jeu, les points extra avec les bottées de précision, toute la kit du concept du Canada. Okay? Now, basis the fact that we look at expansion as an opportunity, and for your information, the expansion concept has been voted unanimously for and approved by the Board of Governors of the CFL as of our last meeting in Hamilton, just to put the record straight. And the key word is unanimous. The criteria for new CFL franchises, what we're looking for, we set up a 5-point grid, and basically we've been evaluating the grid on a 1 to 5 basis for each point. Number 1 point, we have to have people who have the ability to support the long-term commitment. In other words, the quality of ownership is point number 1. Le point plus important pour nous autres, ça c'est la capacité des gens qui veulent acheter des franchises. The second point, of course, is we're looking for people with sports management experience. An example, this is why we're so excited about the prospects of people in Portland. The Portland Trail Blazers are regarded as the top marketing and merchandising group in the NBA. And certainly to have people like these as a potential partner would be very exciting for ourselves. Nous voulons chercher les gens avec une expérience de gestion du sport. J'ai parlé avec l'exemple des Trail Blazers de Portland, puis je pense que si nous sommes capables d'attirer ou chercher les gens comme ça, ça va nous aider énormément. The third point, of course, is going into a new market. If you go into Japan to sell your goods, when we were in the food business, we spent 8 years developing local ownership or local marketing capabilities. The key to success in getting into a new market is you have to use local expertise. Not only do the people have to have strong financial resources, not only do they have to have experience in sports management, but you have to have the ability to be able to network in the business community. Don't forget, going into the new markets, the key to success is not television. The key to success is your growth gate and your local sponsorship, which is dependent upon your networking capabilities. So let's clarify the TV issue before you ask me the question. Le point numéro 3, c'est qu'il faut avoir les gens locaux pour être capable de faire le networking dans la communauté du business pour vraiment réussir. Stadium capabilities. We've asked each applicant, they have to be able to provide a facility at least between 30 to 50,000 seats. The historical average of fan attendance in the CFL is around 25 to 27,000. This takes the big stadiums and the small stadiums. It takes the weather patterns. It takes the highs and lows of clubs with their on-field performance. But all of the clubs or people who want to come in, il faut avoir la capacité de stade de 30 à 50 000 personnes. Okay? And we can discuss some of those issues as we go forward. The fifth point, and this is a point that I can't speak about too much because it's so important. And you may think it's a bunch of motherhood, but it is kind of important when you're running a diverse business. Sharing the vision of growth. The people that we want to do business with have to be able to not only work with their own agendas, but be able to understand the big picture. And the big picture is how do we grow our league? And this thing is one of the key points in our 5. I mean, we have it 1 to 5 in terms of our listings, but at the same time, 1 point is not necessarily more important than the other. And this is why I'm trying to spend as much time as possible analyzing the people's management styles, management philosophies, and what their agendas are. because once you get together with someone, you want to make sure it's going to be a long-term relationship. Le point numéro 5, ça, c'est qu'il faut chercher les gens qui partagent la vision de croissance que nous avons chez nous et que nous voulons exporter aux États-Unis. Now, the benefits. What would the benefits be to the Canadian Football League? Well, basically, the idea of having new cities, partners, and expansion fees is really tied to increasing the value of your base business. When you remember when I joined, I said we want to make sure we stabilize ourselves to increase the actual value of the franchises. Once you do that and you bring in new partners, you add value to your business. And basically, I see my job as the person who's supposed to try to help the owners add value to their franchises. The larger market creates opportunities for developing bigger sponsorships. With the north-south trading patterns now, there's going to be a hell of a push for people trying to penetrate our market and for Canadian companies trying to penetrate the U.S. market. And so if we're able to have 3 or 4 cities or 5 cities or whatever in a new market, we'll be able to increase the magnitude of our sponsorship scope. The third is also important in that we'd be able to reduce the costs on a pro rata basis to operate the league. In other words, you share the risk and you spread your risk out on a further base. Okay? We don't often talk about the economic benefits of the CFL, but we have had 3 to 4 studies that have been done since 1989, and it's clearly evident that a benefit of a CFL franchise to any city ranges between $25 to $35 million. And I would say that when we get into other sites in U.S. markets, the spin-off effect may be even larger. We also have the impact of job creation, which is kind of important. If I go into a city such as Montreal and I look at the possibility of creating 263 jobs in Montreal as a result of having a CFL franchise, and Montreal is going through a pretty tough time right now with a lot of major companies leaving and manufacturing companies closing down, job creation is important. It's also important to football players. The expanded fan base is another benefit, and of course, we want to project an image that we are dynamic, that we are growing, and we are changing. Now let's take a look at some of these potential sites. I hope you can see that. It took us a hell of a long time. Geez, can you ever imagine tracing a map down by hand and then putting it onto an acetate? Now, in terms of the sites, you'll see the legend on the map. It has our original plan, potential sites, and WLAF sites. Now, in terms of our original plan, we had Portland, Montreal, and Halifax. Obviously, we're in very serious discussions with Portland and Montreal, and I can give you some more detail a little later. Sacramento, a WLAF site, of course San Antonio and Orlando. These teams now are actually still in a standalone operational mode where they have their equipment, they have most of their coaches, they have most of their admin staff around and ready to go. Potential sites, places such as San Jose, we've received serious calls from. We have 2 interesting opportunities here in that these are potential NFL expansion sites. As I said to you before, we have no interest in going into any NFL areas. Our strategy is very similar to the strategy utilized by Walmart. Walmart was a very successful company in the U.S. that built its business on going into the mid-sized cities and not getting into your major areas. In other words, you have less competition in your mid-sized markets, you can become more of a dominant player. If these sites are not awarded NFL franchises, we have had word out of these areas that they'd be most interested in coming into the CFL. And for your information, they both average close to 40,000 people on an average basis through their history in the USFL. Now, since I guess this map was drawn up a couple of days ago, we've had an exciting piece of news. You may have read in the papers that the National Baseball League has rejected the offer to move the San Francisco Giants into St. Petersburg. Well, I just happened to receive a call yesterday, and one of the groups that we've talked to in the States has gone into St. Petersburg now, and of course is very interested in getting a CFL franchise into that area. And of course the people in St. Petersburg, since they've had a stadium vacant for 2 years with a couple of tractor pulls and arena football, are quite interested in looking at that possibility. We also have had this week a strong interest that's come out of Las Vegas. We had that especially for Mike McCarthy, because Mike, we know how much Mike likes to pull the machines. I'm just joking, Mike. But the idea is that we're starting to see a hub of activity come out of the U.S. Again, let me remind you that strategically we are not going to jump at any opportunity that is available, but we want to go in an organized fashion and a very prudent fashion. We will not go into any NFL cities. It is not our strategy. Comme vous voulez voir, là, il y a trois places sur la carte où nous avons notre plan originaire avec Montréal, Portland, puis Halifax. Nous avons les sites potentiels de World League comme Sacramento, San Antonio, puis Orlando. Et nous avons des autres sites avec un potentiel d'expansion. So we have had over 10 to 12 people that have talked to us about potential sites in the CFL. Now, in terms of specifics, the sites that we are having the most serious discussion with at this time are obviously Portland. Portland's situation is simple. The reason that we've had such a long delay in our discussions has been that the stadium project for the basketball stadium that Mr. Allen and his group are constructing took longer than anticipated to get the deal set up with the City of Portland. We knew from the beginning that there would be no serious discussions until that contract was signed with the city to enable them to construct and begin construction of the new stadium. That has been completed as of I believe last Tuesday. I was talking to them last Wednesday, and now they are making their presentation and preparing it for Mr. Allen for discussion in the next few weeks. I guess it's up to Portland now to decide the fate of whether they want to come into the CFL or not. In Montreal, Roger Dorey is heading up a group to bring football back to Montreal. Roger ran the Montreal Machine, was very successful at it, and at the same time is a very strong entrepreneur and marketer. We have met with the RIO, which is a Régie d'Installation Olympique. We have also met with some government people who have given us their blessing. We started to meet with major corporations. Roger's major task is to find a strong majority investor to put money into the club to support his interest. Sacramento, of course, is headed up by Fred Anderson. Fred was the owner of the Sacramento Surge. Fred is a fourth generation Anderson in the city of Sacramento. He has the 496th largest private company in the United States called Pacific Coast Construction, employs 2,200 people. Fred is a very, I guess, successful businessman and one of the originators of bringing football into Sacramento. Fred is at the position now where he is evaluating the potential of a CFL site, discussing with the business community, and having to come to some conclusions himself as to what he wants to do. San Antonio is Larry Benson. Larry Benson, of course, is part of the Benson family that owns the New Orleans Saints. Larry is the one who originated the World League team in San Antonio. What is particularly interesting about this position and possibility is the Alamo Dome, which I visited last week, which has 65,000 seats. It is made just for football. It is not made for baseball. It is made for football. It is also going to be made for hockey. They're going to have 2 hockey rinks on in the stadium. It's just an absolutely beautiful facility. It was costed $185 million US. It's been paid for out of transit taxes. When the doors open up next spring, it will be completely paid for, which is quite interesting. These people are very keen to have football. For the people who have told me I have rocks in my head looking at San Antonio, if you look at the history of the franchise, the problem with San Antonio from the start was venue and ownership. I can tell you the Benson family is a very wealthy family, a very strong family, and a great bunch of business people. The town of San Antonio was very excited about the prospects of the CFL. Again, there's some logistical issues for Mr. Benson to discuss with his partners and to figure out, and then we'll be having further discussions. We've also had some discussions with people in Orlando. It's, I think, fairly early in the game in Orlando, but at the same time there's a group that's headed up by a fellow named Roy Ambediner, and they're very serious about bringing football into Orlando. I think out of the prospects that we have right now, and I guess I give Stephen Brunt the award for investigative journalism, looking at Portland, Montreal, Sacramento, and San Antonio are our 4 hot buttons at this particular time. Now, in terms of key issues, et avant que je commence avec les points clés, c'est que à Montréal, nous avons déjà commencé nos discussions avec Roger Doré. Roger était le président du Machine de Montréal. Roger, c'est un homme très fort dans la mise en marché, puis un bonhomme qui veut ramener le football à Montréal. Roger est au point qu'il faut chercher un investisseur principal pour être capable de parler avec moi concernant la future possibilité de franchise. The key issues. Timing of entry. You're all asking me when these things would happen, if they do happen. Well, the reality of the situation is I can't guarantee you the exact time of this because the transactions have to be concluded. And at the same time, I have to go back to the board and discuss the opportunities with the board for final approval. Okay? I can tell you that for the 1993 season, we would have to make decisions by the end of the calendar year. And of course, when we talk of decisions, we want the decisions to impact on teams who have infrastructures in place. The worst mistake you can ever make is trying to start a business up when you're not ready. The opportunity that we face with some of the WLAF cities is that they have the infrastructures in place, so their startup time is not a problem. Okay? The other issue, of course, is your non-import import rule, which is a $64 question. We have a standing committee made up of general managers. We are talking to immigration lawyers, both in the United States and Canada. We have tossed about different options and how we treat it. All I can tell you at this time is that we have not made any formal decisions or statements on the issue, but we do have a philosophical issue or position that we want to make sure that we will support Canadian university football because I'm very proud to have come through that system, and I believe that the rule that was implemented in 1936 for the trivia buffs as a protectionism rule for Canadians has served its time, and what we have to do is to make sure that as we advance ourselves that we provide Canadians with an opportunity to play football. But the bottom line is that we have to be more competitive because as we're going into a new market and a new time, and in any business and in any sort of walk of life, you're going to have to be ready to compete. And I'll be honest with you, when I played, I thought I played because I was a good football player, not just because I was a Canadian. And when I knocked the crap out of somebody who was bigger than I was, I didn't care where he came from as long as we were going to win the game. And I can tell you that I can't see how people such as Michael Souls and Blake Marshall wouldn't play on any team in any league anywhere. We'll get to that issue as we go forward in time. The other issue, of course, is the preparation of logistics, infrastructure, things such as workmen's compensation, health and benefits, all of the operational issues, visas going across the borders, transportation. There's a lot of logistical work to be done. We have a standing committee of general managers who are involved in this particular area. Les points clés vis-à-vis les issues, ça c'est le timing, si vous voulez, d'entrer dans la Ligue. Le deuxième, ça c'est le règlement de ration entre les Canadiens puis les Américains. Et le troisième point, ça c'est la préparation des logistics pour entrer dans un marché étranger. An idea, an example, potential conference alignment. We could have either 2 conferences, an Eastern or Western Conference. We could have 3 conferences, a Pacific, Central, and Eastern. There's all sorts of options that we're looking at right now. Greg Fulton has drawn up an 8-team schedule, because I'm not making you any guarantees today. He's drawn up a 10-team schedule, and he's drawn up a 12-team schedule. This is the type of potential alignment we could have in the league. Okay? Conclusion. Sorry about that. The CFL is changing, and I think we're changing in a positive way. We want to pursue a window of opportunity. Bottom line is we want to export a unique, differentiated style. We're not going to be a feeder system. We're not going to be a developmental league. We're not going to be a Me Too product. Everybody I've talked to, they've had to measure the field, the width, the length, whether they can get it into their stadiums. There have been no problems in any of the physical areas we've talked to because people realize we're selling a uniquely Canadian product which is differentiated. And I'm not going to get into discussions about if we're going to modify rules. Bottom line is we're not going to modify we're not going to modify anything that's made this game as great as it is. We want to see if we can become a North American player in terms of business. This is sort of the strategic plan that was presented to the governors, and since that time has been refined after some of the visits into the United States and further discussions in the Canadian market. That's about it for the formal presentation. Maybe I could address or answer some questions.
A solid, confident presentation by the Commissioner of the Canadian Football League, Larry Smith, who outlined his game plan. And really, I think one of the key points as we looked at it here, it's an idea to export the Canadian Football League, but here are parts of the game plan outlined by Larry Smith. Criteria for expansion.
Well, you know, that's simply how and when. You know, how soon can they get expansion? It's obvious today from his statements that it is uppermost in the minds of the governors and, of course, Larry Smith himself to expand. Now, number two, I think that what was interesting is the targeted areas, and logically it would be mid-sized cities, U.S. cities. The San Jose's, the Sacramento's, the San Antonios seem to fit perfectly into the CFL plans because they are not targeted areas by the NFL and probably never can hope to have an NHL franchise. So those target areas are very important too.
The business plan that the Canadian Football League has put in place already with salary caps lends well to a plan to possibly expand at this particular time.
Yeah, I think it does because you know, the league has come full circle here, where I think that they're being more fiscally responsible than ever. I mean, it's always been bandied about that, hey, we have to tighten our belt and do X number of things, and it's been a kind of a loose term. We've got to tighten the screws down, as Larry Smith said today. But I think more than ever at this point in time, they have a very concrete and structured business fiscal plan for teams to be solvent, not based on TV monies. You know, leagues have expanded in the past to try and acquire big TV deals that'll bail them out. But this, make no mistake now, they are not doing this. They're expanding to get franchise revenues, and they're expanding to areas that they think can really logistically survive.
And the key date outlined in the presentation this morning is basically by the end of the calendar year to find a way to possibly expand for 1993. So it would have to be done by the 1st of January.
Yeah, you know, the good news in that area is the fact that, you know, they say by the end of 1992, that's their time frame. By then they have to have all the ducks in a row. But the good news is they're going to cities that have had pro football already. They're talking to ownership that's been involved in owning pro football already. So for them to implement and get ready for 1993 would not be as big a problem as, let's say, going to an area where the ownership had not been involved in pro sport. The city had not had pro football there before. So that is the good news. And I think the only stumbling block, as Larry Smith seemed to indicate at the end, was some of the logistics involved, the immigration, the workman's comp, the travel costs. Is it going to be feasible for Hamilton to go to Sacramento? And you know, can they survive on a limited budget to do these things? So logistically, those are some of the few problems. If they can be ironed out, I mean, I think it is very favorable that we'll see at least 2 teams in 1993.
As it stands right now, it looks like the Canadian Football League has a window of opportunity, as Larry Smith pointed out. We'll take you back to Skydome now as the questions and answers continue.
The question that you have to answer yourself or ask yourself is it in our best interest to survive in that manner? Does it mean that we would have to go through further downsizing? Does it mean that we'd have to lower the scale of play? Does it mean that we would have to lower or change the image to a semi-professional type football as we go forward? Is the market size in terms of the sponsorship and advertising capable of supporting the infrastructure as it exists today? You know, those are the questions you ask yourself.
So what you're saying is a 9-team league in this country is not viable?
Well, what I'm saying is a 9-team league in this country, it can be viable, but I think that basis the way that we're trying to run it, it's in our best interest to look at growing the business, because if I didn't feel so strongly about the product, I wouldn't be trying to promote this.
Howard Berger, the Fan.
Larry, I'm wondering, can all of these issues that you've been discussing, primarily obviously the gathering of potential sites and you know, the immigration issue. Can all of this be brought together realistically, as you mentioned, by the end of the calendar year to ensure that there'll be some expansion in the CFL next year? Do you believe that's a realistic possibility?
Well, I think right now, in the next few weeks, we're going to find out, Howard, a lot about our prospects for 1993. I can tell you right now that we've already had 2 applications for 1994 franchises. One is Birmingham and the other is Hawaii that's wrote us a letter and saying they'd be most interested in being considered for 94. Their reasoning, of course, is that it's going to take them 18 months to prepare themselves properly to get set up. It's really what's going to unfold in the next few weeks that really determines our ability to go to 93. We're not going to make silly decisions to try and jump on the wagon for 93. If it's not right, you know, we're not going to do it. If it's not right, we'll wait for the extra year because that'll just give us more lead time to prepare.
CFRB.
4 or 5 years ago, when the NFL was on strike, some CFL games were shown in the United States, and they drew hilarious responses, things like, "What is a rouge?" and so forth. Why do you feel that this game can be sold to the fans, never mind the possible sponsors?
Well, I think that one of the things that's very evident is that there's a real, I guess, hunger for football in many cities that will never have NFL football. At the same time, there's an opportunity in my mind, if you sell your product and educate people properly, you can sell differentiated product. The other thing is that if we go back in history, and of course Greg helped me with this morning, do you realize that it was in the 1920s when Notre Dame had their big football teams with the 4 horsemen or whatever they were called, they had motion in their backfield? And you know why there's no motion in the NFL today? Is because the other college teams had to take the rule out so these guys wouldn't whip them. And I believe that once we educate people as to what our game has and the tradition of our game, that we can be successful. And don't forget, the key here is that we're not going into the U.S. market potentially for big TV money. If TV money grows, it'll be a result of doing our job properly. Everybody I've talked to has been positioned accordingly. You make your money on gross gate, on local sponsorships. TV is an add-on, okay? So don't get yourself hooked into this game of TV. We will not be driven by TV.
Back row.
Sir, do you not also face the problem of selling Americans on the CFL? Does it not also have a minor league image or bush league image in the States?
You'll be happy to know that it doesn't. The CFL is well respected in the United States. It is respected as an old league with tradition and history, and people look at it and say, gee, it is different. I was down in Boston this weekend visiting with some NFL owners, and it was interesting to see. I sat with the people in the box, about 25 of them, and the feedback that I had, because they were knowledgeable football people, you know, we like a lot of the rules that you have because they're more exciting than our rules. I think it's all in how you position your product. If you get away from a differentiation into a Me Too syndrome, you're dead, and then you become a really inferior product.
Lady in red.
Smith, est-ce qu'il faut comprendre que les fans de Montréal ont de très bonnes chances de revoir une équipe de la Ligue canadienne l'an prochain?
Mais je pense que les possibilités sont très bonnes. Vraiment, un gars comme Roger Doré, c'est un gars très affirmatif, c'est un gars dynamique, un gars qui peut chercher les gens. Roger est au point maintenant, c'est qu'il a fait toute l'analyse, si tu veux. Nous avons construit des budgets, nous avons construit un plan d'action, nous avons eu des comptables agréés pour vérifier les chiffres. Lui a visité déjà des commanditaires et les points clés, c'est vraiment la stade, parce qu'il faut avoir le bail. Et deuxième point, il faut avoir l'investisseur principal. Alors, son plus grand travail, c'est vraiment de chercher son investisseur principal.
Monsieur Smith, est-ce que vous pouvez être plus précis sur le contenu canadien? Je veux dire par là les joueurs canadiens. Est-ce qu'on s'en va vers une ligue avec une ligue canadienne aux États-Unis, mais sans contenu canadien, sans joueurs canadiens, avec la norme abandonnée?
Mais moi, je suis pas au point que je vais discuter exactement ce sera quoi le plan d'action, parce que c'est pas confirmé. Mais gardant les options, tu peux avoir une ligue qui est uniquement canadienne. Tu peux avoir une ligue qui dit qu'il faut avoir les nombres de Canadiens qui sont dans la ligue, qui sont X. Tu peux avoir une ligue qui est uniquement canadienne, qui dit « Ah, c'est ouvert à tout le monde ». Tu peux avoir aussi une ligue canadienne qui dit « Aux États-Unis, tu peux avoir n'importe quel joueur, mais au Canada, il faut avoir X nombre de joueurs locaux ». OK? Alors, il y a 3 ou 4 options, puis les variations des options. Nous ne sommes pas au point pour vraiment une décision parce qu'il faut avoir aussi le côté légal. Parce que tu ne peux pas rentrer dans un autre pays puis il dit « Hey, il faut faire ça », puis les gens vous disent « Mais sorry, les règlements ici ne permettent pas ça ».
Can you answer that same question in English, please?
Basically, I said that there are options to the import-non-import rule that you can just visualize. One is you have a uniquely Canadian game with X number of Canadians in all teams, and you try and force the rule through into the United States market. You have another situation where you have it wide open to all races, no matter what nationality. You don't have a predetermined number of Canadians. The other area is you have open market in the U.S. for imports or Canadian or American ball players, and in Canada you have designated local ball players who are Canadian. And basically you can evaluate how you perform against those U.S. teams over a period of time to determine your caliber capabilities.
Rick Matsumoto.
Just as a supplementary, how do you protect the Canadian identity? If you go and expand to the elephant, how do you protect that?
Let me ask you a question. What is unique about our game? Width, length, motion, points on field goals, punts, okay? 12 men, the way we play the game, that's what's unique. That's what's Canadian.
Jay Greenberg.
Far away from Canada, San Antonio. Do you have any concerns that will make it seem too foreign to sell there? And can you ever see, if you do succeed in places like that, and that becomes a problem, can you ever foresee changing the name of the league?
Well, let me ask you a question. Let's go into brand management in the packaged goods business. Let's take the concept of NFL. When you go into Europe, what do you sell? NFL, right? We go into the U.S., what do we sell? CFL. What does CFL mean? CFL. So sell your brand. Now the brand identity to Canadians is obviously Canadian Football League. Brand identity to the Americans, it's going to be what you want it to be. It's going to be CFL. So therefore you can take your tradition and history, use your brand, sell your brand to build your business. To me it makes business sense.
Monsieur le commissaire, au cours des dernières années, il ne s'est pas passé une année sans qu'une franchise soit en difficulté financière ou encore que le propriétaire disparaisse. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous garantir qu'avant qu'il y ait une expansion de la Ligue canadienne de football, toutes les franchises actuelles soient financièrement stables?
Moi, je peux vous garantir une chose. Tous les contrôles, ils sont en place, ils seraient en place pour assurer que si les gestionnaires gèrent comme il faut, les gens vont être au break-even puis ils vont faire un profit. Il faut admettre une chose, que dans un business, personne ne fait des garanties. Et deuxième point, ça dépend toujours sur la qualité de gestion dans une entreprise. Okay? Tu peux avoir tous les contrôles, toutes les règles, tous les ordinateurs, tous les contrôles financiers, mais si les gestionnaires ne sont pas bons, c'est pourquoi nous avons ajouté les gens comme John Mitchell, les gens comme Brian Cooper. Ça, c'est les gens très compétents, les gens qui sont les hommes d'affaires. Okay? Et nous voulons ramener et encourager plus des gens comme ça pour vraiment travailler dans notre ligue. Il faut avoir les bons gestionnaires.
Est-ce que vous les avez?
Mais de plus en plus, oui.
We're going to cut off the questions there right now.
And as they do that, we're back at our control center here in Toronto for some reaction to exactly what has gone on today. There was no official announcement of Canadian Football League expansion, but it does sound a little bit optimistic as far as the league is concerned. And here are the front runners for potential sites as it goes. Not necessarily a big surprise from the news of the last couple of days, but Montreal, Portland, Sacramento, and San Antonio are the front runners as it would look right now if the league can expand in 1993. Now there's some rather interesting divisional alignments that would come as a result of adding those two teams. There would be a Pacific division for the first time, or at least that's what the league is looking at, including Vancouver, Sacramento, Portland, and Calgary, and I suppose that only makes sense. The Central Division, all of a sudden there's no Western Division in Canadian football if this happens. Winnipeg, San Antonio, Saskatchewan, and Edmonton. And the Eastern Division would include Montreal, Ottawa, Hamilton, and Toronto. That is, of course, if the Canadian Football League can pull off this expansion plan for a date set at January of 1993. Quick assessment of what you heard today.
John, I don't know about you, but as I look at that potential alignment, I mean, I'm excited about it. I think the Pacific Conference looks exciting, but it's been a pretty interesting plan put forth by Larry Smith. You know, he talks about Portland. Hey, the ball is in their court. They want Portland desperately. Paul Allen, mega bucks, good owner in the NBA with the Trailblazers. They want Portland badly. Montreal, they need investors. Roger Dory, he has to put a group together to take his plan to the next level. Sacramento, Fred Anderson down there is reevaluating their plans. Do they really want, in fact, to be a part of the CFL?
But
the CFL wants them.
The WLAF connection, which includes equipment and some personnel already on hand.
No, that's true. But they are in a holding pattern right now. They're reevaluating. And, of course, the last possible site, San Antonio, Larry Benson, big money down there. His brother owns the New Orleans Saints. Mike Riley, former coach of the Bombers, is in place to run that team. That is a great site. So the league definitely is courting them.
Well, back at Skydome right now, we have the Argo General Manager, Mike McCarthy, hooked up and online. And, Mike, a quick assessment from you as to what you heard and what the Commissioner had to say today.
Well, these are things, John, that we've been discussing for the last... we started expansion discussions almost a year ago before Larry came to the league, and it's really been upbeat and moving forward rapidly since Larry's been Commissioner.
You were on the expansion committee with Hugh Campbell and a couple of others. So I take it a lot of this today is not a major surprise to you.
No, many of these things have been discussed over the last few months, and especially 3 weeks ago in Hamilton at the governor's meeting where we had an update. We have numerous committees within the expansion issue, and one is to work on the salary cap issue. One is the import-non-import ratio. How will we deal with these kind of these potential problems we may have?
Mike, Leif Pedersen here. Good to see you.
Hey, Leif.
What do you say to people when they say to you, hey, others have failed in some of those cities you're looking at. Why are you so brazen to think that your product is going to survive?
I think Larry was trying to make a key point that it was television revenue that generated the success or non-success of those franchises in the World League. Our approach is it's going to be gross gate and sponsorship and marketing, and you know, if we can get 27,000 people with our salary cap at say 2.5 or lower over the next couple of years, we don't have to rely on television to survive. Television will be a bonus.
You know, Mike, on paper, it sounds like a great plan. You know, everything's been very positive today. Just to bring one negative thing in here, what do you say at the meetings to guys like Cal Murphy that are vehemently opposed to it?
Well, Cal has always expressed he's worried about the survival of the Canadian Football League. The tradition of the league is a 100-year history we do have. I understand what he means, but I think we're in a renaissance right now, and with free trade in the world, and the way Europe has opened up, the time is right, and we ought to be there and move into it if we can.
Mike, it sounds very positive, and we've been very positive here at TSN about listening to Mr. Smith today, but can you just put a handle on a couple of negatives that would come out of this, suggesting that there is an expansion, adding Montreal and Portland and Sacramento and San Antonio? You know, what are the negatives?
Well, I think, you know, number one, that everybody is talking about the import-non-import ratio issue. Do we play with Canadians or without Canadians? Our plan is that we will, if all the expansion does happen, that we will have the same amount of Canadian content that we have right now. What we're hoping that develops out of all this is that the high schools and the CIAU, the Simon Frasers, we get more kids out and get more interested in getting into minor league football programs and developing more Canadians so we can supply these teams with that talent. I think that's probably the biggest issue we have. Also, is the Canadian Football League a bush league compared to the National Football League? We are different. We are unique. We have different rules. What makes our game unique is the rules, and we're not going to change it. We're not going to change field size. We're not going to change down and distance. We're going to play with 12 men, and these, I think, are the concepts that people tend to push aside and make us look a little less. But I think once they see our game played, they're going to be really excited about it.
Mike, everybody eager to know if there will be expansion in 1993. Larry Smith indicated today the only thing standing in the way are a few logistical problems. You have been very close to this. Immigration, travel costs, workman comp, all those things. Can they be cleared up in time to expand for 93?
Very much so, Leif. I was in the initial groundworks in the United States Football League 10 years ago, And we put a football team together in 3 months and played in the '83 season. So it's very, very possible. And again, if you have a San Antonio or a Sacramento or Orlando where they have footholds from the World League teams, a lot of the little things that you take care of, having the pens and pencils and the equipment and all that kind of stuff is already there. You have to go out and evaluate. And I know from the scuttlebutt I've been hearing, the San Antonios and the Sacramentos has already evaluated the talent in the Canadian Football League as towards an expansion draft.
Mike, you were talking about all the changes in the world that we've witnessed in the last 5 years or even going back to 10 years. Do you see it right now that the CFL needs to expand to survive?
I don't think we need it to survive, John. I think we need it to become a truly North American business. We have an opportunity here to... We had numerous owners over the year, the Harold Ballards, the David Brayleys in Hamilton, the Murray Pesums, where these guys have taken every nickel they've had and they've sunk it into this league and they've gotten very little back to keep this game going. We have an opportunity now to move forward and to develop some other funds, and perhaps these fellows will get some money back for their investment and the league will grow.
Mike, you work for a very flamboyant ownership group, and with the Larry Rickmans, the Glebermans, etc., Bill Comrie just joining the group. This was inevitable, wasn't it?
We have, I tell you, you sit around the meetings and it's fortunate to sit in those meetings with the governors and the guys who actually own the football teams and pay the bills. And we have a dynamic group right now. I mean, I've been around for 8 years in this league and seen a lot of owners come and go. But right now, I tell you, we have with the Bruce McDowells, the Gretzkys, the Candys in our town, the Comries, he's a dynamic individual. The Glebermans have vision. We have a new ownership group in Hamilton that has a different thinking, a different philosophy. This league's on the move, and we have the right people in place to perhaps make all this come together.
All right, Mike, thank you very much for joining us down there today.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Leif.
We'll talk again soon. Well, I tried to get Mike to discuss some of the negatives here, and I guess maybe it's an upbeat mood and the fact that Larry Smith did such a fine job of outlining his game plan and his business plan. Negatives, where are they?
Well, John, at this point in time, I don't really want to talk about the negatives either, because I am very bullish on expansion. I think we have to look to new areas of revenues. To stay status quo would be just such an archaic move at this point, and really I think the positives, the excitement that will be created by this outweigh any possible negatives and any logistical problems. I thought Larry Smith, let's give him some credit. Did he ever handle himself well in this press conference? He outlined a plan that is very near and dear to him. He's put together a fiscally responsible plan for the new people that may come in. And you know what? Like the hidden message in all of this is, hey, we're not worried about trying to expand for TV monies. You know what the hidden message today is? We are going to create a demand with our product. Everything he says reverts back to all his business expertise. We are going to create a demand, and they will come to us.
And again, saying it was going to be called the Canadian Football League, if in fact there is an expansion. It is really an export, as the Canadian Football League sees it right now, of the Canadian brand of football to the United States. Let's go back to Skydome. Rod Smith is there.
Thank you, John. And joining me now, the president of the Ottawa Rough Riders, Lonnie Gleberman. Lonnie, for you, this must be a welcome day, really. This is something that you and your father, Bernard, wanted.
Absolutely. It's been coming for a long time. Since I was in grade school, me and my friends always wanted to have CFL in cities down in the States because it's a great game. We watch it. We always wanted to have some down in the American cities because the Americans love football. They love the great game of CFL. We watched it. We played it on our playground. Believe me, the American kids will come to this game.
That's the point I wanted to talk about, really. You're an American. You really got to like this game, where I guess a lot of your friends really didn't. This was kind of a novel approach to you when everyone else was watching the NFL, wasn't it?
Well, no, my friends watched it too. We watched Ferragamo, we watched Terry Metcalf, we were watching Cousin, all those guys playing up in the CFL. Believe me, all the kids in Detroit will be watching the Grey Cup come November 29th. Believe me, it is well known down there. The kids just got a JS5 football. My friend coached football down there. They all know what it is. They love the CFL. Believe me, the CFL is more popular than we realize down in the United States.
When you and your father got involved with the CFL and the Ottawa Rough Riders, because originally you wanted to get an expansion team for Detroit, was it a condition with the commissioner, then Donald Crump, that you were going to get involved in a Canadian team, the Ottawa Rough Riders, but you wanted down the road expansion? Was that a condition of ownership?
Oh, absolutely. We were bought into this league. The Toronto Augers actually really helped us get involved, and they were very for expansion. We really believed that there would be expansion, and now there is. Yeah, it was very important because without expansion, we really don't see an upside with an 8-team league.
Lonnie, we've seen in the past, like the World Football League, the World League of American Football, we've seen some U.S. cities not work necessarily with expansion football. Why do you think it'll work now?
Well, see, what a lot of people forget, I guess, is that it did work in the United States Football League. Jacksonville drew over 46,000 fans a game. Memphis drew over 35,000 fans a game. If you go to the right cities, you got to stay out of the Chicagos, you got to stay out of the LAs. But Memphis, Jacksonville, Birmingham, Orlando, those are cities that can definitely work. They worked before in the USFL and they'll work again in the CFL.
Do you have any interest in all in maintaining a certain quota of Canadians in Canadian Football League? Is that important?
Well, I think the Canadians are part of the backbone of the league, but one of the things we should understand is a lot of guys that play for the Ottawa Rough Riders, Patrick Wayne, Rob Smith, Herb Damon, Darren Joseph, those guys are playing because they're great football players. And I think a lot of people think that every guy that's Canadian that plays is only playing because he's Canadian. For heaven's sakes, these guys are great football players, whether they're Canadian or American, and I think that's they owe a little more respect, and I think the quota kind of brings that down. But I think there'll always be Canadians in this football game. They've been part of it for all these years. They grew up playing it. My biggest concern is the high schools and the universities stressing more importance on football in those areas and help produce better players. The biggest problem that Canadian players have is they come out of programs that don't put enough emphasis and don't spend enough money on their football programs. We got, as a CFL, we got to work closer with that. But I think all in all, throughout the country of Canada, there has to be more emphasis placed and more money spent on amateur football. I mean, it is, to me, a travesty that a football coach in high school doesn't even get paid. I mean, that to me is really horrible, and that's where the problem starts.
Lonnie, as for CFL expansion, to you, is this a done deal? It certainly sounds like it will be very soon.
Well, I guess when those guys officially sign up, but yeah, I believe the CFL will be expanding next year. I'm extremely excited about it. Believe me, it'll be extremely successful in the United States. It'll bring a whole new life to our league. I mean, we haven't expanded since 1954. It's time to move on. The rest of the world has kind of passed us by. We've kind of stayed in the 1950s. It's time to move forward. We've got a great new commissioner, a great new league office, and we're going to have a great new league both in the States and in Canada.
Thank you, Lonnie.
Thank you.
Lonnie Gleiberman, the president of the Ottawa Rough Riders, certainly very much in favor of CFL expansion. John and Leif, back to you.
All right, Rod, everything sounds so positive. I have a question for Leif. Will the Canadian Football League sell in the United States?
Well, I mean, obviously that's the downside to all of this. You know, you take a big risk like this, expanding your product and anticipating that it will sell. If it doesn't, hey, I mean, that is the major downside. But, you know, let me play the devil's advocate just for a second. And you know, this is what I hear around when I talk to people about, hey, what do you think? CFL, should they expand or not? I hear this one, and it's a pretty good analogy. When Australian rules football came to Canada, you know, like everybody kind of just went, oh. Now, I'm wondering, you know, we thought it was kind of freak football, but I'm wondering in San Antonio and these places, are they going to think that too? Now, I'm merely playing the devil's advocate here because I think it will work, but there's the downside. Hey, maybe it doesn't.
Yeah, and I guess the biggest concern that everyone seems to have is what happens to Canadians playing this Canadian game. Let's get some reaction on that right now from Rod Smith.
Thank you, John. And to address that concern, we have John McConaughey with us now, John, Director of Marketing for the CIAU. Your reaction to expansion, because I would think there are some negatives here for Canadian football players.
Well, I guess the first thing is that potentially they could reduce the number of opportunities for Canadian university football players coming out of our program and looking for a professional career. It's on the other side of the coin. It's a CFL decision. I think the people that are really going to determine whether their decisions are right or wrong is going to be the Canadian public to a large degree. We have a different raison d'etre. We have a different base of operation. We've been around since 1874. So philosophically, we're operating on a different plane than the CFL is, and we're going to continue to have university football programs in this country in the future.
But just the same, if I'm to play the devil's advocate here, I played college football. Part of the little carrot at the end, part of it, in addition to trying to get an education, was a possibility of playing professional ball in the CFL. Do you think that this could discourage some good football players from playing in the CIAU?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I guess basically I'm an optimist, and I'm saying that you know, over the past few years, the quality of players coming out of our program has improved dramatically. I think that's going to continue. It's indicative of the commitment that the universities are making to football in this country, and I guess on that basis, then they're going to come out and they're going to be able, I think, in a large number, fairly large numbers, anyways, to compete with the college players coming out of the U.S. schools. And I go back to the bowl games in '78 and '79, where our CIU All-Stars played U.S. college All-Stars, basically Division II players, but they had to bring in some Division I players to spice up the gate, and we weren't embarrassed. So, I think we've come a lot further in the past 13 years.
Thanks a lot, John.
You're welcome, Rod.
John McConaughey, Director of Marketing for the CIAU, who doesn't express some serious concern about the Canadian content in the future Canadian Football League, which could include some American teams that we've been hearing today. John, back to you.
Lee, if you played as a Canadian in this Canadian game, and looking back, I suppose this would concern a young graduate of Otterbein back about 15 years ago or so.
Yeah, sure it would have. You know, you talk about skilled positions, corners, receivers, and that, and obviously the training is better in the U.S. They're better prepared to make the step into pro football. But, you know, our game is so uniquely different. The motion, the little techniques involved with playing it, that I think the good Canadian players are going to have as equally good an opportunity to still be playing, even if we do expand. And I thought it was interesting how Larry Smith skirted that issue. You know, will this be the demise of Canadian talent in our league? And he said simply, we are selling the Canadian Football League, and that is a brand. That is a brand of football. The Canadian Football League does not stand for Canadian players playing it. So he skirted the issue by saying that we're selling a brand, and you know, he simply put it, if we plan to expand, there are some negatives, some downsides to it. The gradual demise of the Canadian player, that may be part of it. But I think in the short term, Canadian players know the game, they know how to play it, and you can't replace that.